Why do so many women feel like they have to be perfect in order to feel worthy, accepted, or successful? Welcome to the Self Authority Podcast. I'm your host, Elaine Belson, the Self Authority Coach. In this episode, I'm joined by coach, speaker, and podcast host Jessica Cumming. Jessica shares how growing up feeling overlooked and needing to prove herself shaped her perfectionism, independence, and fear of disappointing others, and how those same patterns affect so many women in their work, relationships, and decision making. We talk about why women often tie love and validation to achievement, how over independence can become a survival strategy, why women hesitate to speak up or ask for help, and how learning to trust yourself sometimes means letting go of the need to be perfect. Here's my conversation with Jessica Cumming. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, Elaine. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's lovely having you. So, I know you had a story that you wanted to share with us.
I do. So, it's interesting for me because perfectionism, and I've done a lot of research on this and I've talked a lot about it as well, but this goes way back to before we even realized it happening. And so my story was I was the only girl growing up with a bunch of male cousins. And so I was already different from everyone else. And I felt like I had to be better than them to get recognized. I had to be the perfect one. I had to be the good girl in order to have that validation, in order to have that love, which seemed to come so naturally to my male cousins. And so for me, this is something that's, like I said, started as a young girl and it followed me all the way through college. And part of it happened because about 16, 17 years old, I had a male in my family tell me that I would never amount to anything.
Wow.
Yeah. And he used different words than that, but that was the gist of it. And so from that point on, I wanted to prove this person wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where it was like, if I get the good grades, and it was interesting though, because even before that, that same person had said to me, he was going to take my cousins hunting for doing a good job in school. And I said, well, what about me? I'm already doing good in school. And he said, well, if you get to the A honor roll, then I'll take you, not just the B. But for everyone else, the bar was set lower. So this followed me all the way through college to the point where when I started my corporate career, I was at Dell Technologies for nearly 20 years. But the reality is that 4 weeks into my time there, I was given an amazing opportunity to quit my job and travel the world as an assistant that was working with A-listers, celebrities, singers. And I had the opportunity to go be his assistant. And I turned it down because I didn't think that others would approve.
You didn't think that what?
That others would approve. I didn't think that my family would approve. I didn't think that it was the career path I was supposed to take based on everyone else's approval. And so I ended up staying. Like I said, I was there almost 20 years. So it ended up working out and it worked into a job that I loved, but it started for the wrong reasons. And that is something that has stuck with me ever since I was 22 years old.
Mm-hmm. What do you think was going on for you when you turned that job down?
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard choice and I I hated to do it. And the person that offered me this job is still in the music industry, still travels the world, has been on tour with Bette Midler, Cher. So I mean, I'm not talking um you know, I'm talking
Right.
big stars, Beyonce, right? Pink. Um and so we talked about it recently and it was what was going through my head is it's not the smart career move. It's not the stable path. It's not what others expect of me. And I wonder every every time I talk to this person, I wonder how my life would have been different if I had followed my heart versus what everyone else wanted me or thought I should do.
Mm-hmm. Right. So where do you think that was coming from, though, that need to please everybody?
Love, right?
Mhm.
In order to receive that love, in order to receive that acceptance, I wanted to please other people. That was how I did it. For a large part of my life, my mother and I lived about 2 hours away from where she worked. So she would leave 4 to 5 nights at a time. I would be alone, 8 miles to the closest town, a mile down a dirt road, a quarter mile back in the woods.
Wow.
That's how I lived by myself 4 to 5 nights every 2 weeks.
Wow.
That meant getting myself up for school, showered, fed, on the bus, coming home,
Mm.
homework, meals, everything, and doing it all again the next day.
Right.
But
You were what we call resilient child.
for sure, looking back, it's something that would have landed my mom in jail, but, and by today's standards. But I learned to adapt to my surroundings, and I just learned to put my head down, be the best that I could, and it really came from people will be proud of me if I get the A's, if I get my homework done, if I'm just basically there and nobody has to say anything or do anything, if I can be independent and just do it myself and no one has to worry about me, then I will get love.
Mhm. Right. It's really interesting, how so many women feel that way, that they don't wanna be an imposition on other people.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And, a lot of times if we do speak up or if we do need help, we're looked at as weak, we're looked at as being aggressive. We don't get called the same things when we raise our hands
Yep.
to say something or ask for help versus when a male counterpart does it.
Right. Exactly.
I also came from divorced parents, right? So I just thought I was, if I was quiet, they wouldn't fight. But it had nothing to do with me, right?
Right.
So it's all of these external things that are happening, and it was my kind of fight or flight mode that, just put your head down, do a good job.
Right. Right. I'm curious if you had any siblings that took up more space, because what I often find when I find resilient kids is there's a sibling that's like sucking up all the energy and they don't want to be adding on to that. So and they're resilient, so they learn to just say, I'll just take care of myself. I don't want to be an additional burden to my parents because they already have enough on their plate.
Yeah. So ironically enough, by blood, I am an only child. We did have an exchange student that I call my brother, but we had him when I was 2 years old,
Okay.
15 years older than me. But yeah, so I'm an only child, but my parents both had businesses when I was growing up. My dad owned a car wash and a body shop. My mom owned two gift shops. And so they were really
Mhm.
busy with that. And those were kind of like their babies. And
Yep.
so they were completely busy with those. My aunts and grandmother definitely played a role up until I was about 12 in raising me because they were so busy with that.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because I remember a conversation with my mother because she was always busy, always busy. And finally, I looked at her one day and I said, do I have to make an appointment to spend time with my mother?
Mhm.
And go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, I was thinking, a lot of women might hear this and go, that's really great. Look at you. You're so independent and so accomplished. Um, but the point is that you had a right to not be any of those things.
Mhm.
You had a right to be needy. You had a right to want your parents to help you with your homework or to help you get up and get dressed and go to school. You had a right to quote unquote impose on them,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah, but I think for me, like as I got older, it was just, and especially in my teenage years, right? Like kids are rebellious anyway. But it got to the point that it was just easier for me then to just do it myself. I didn't
Right.
want an authority coming in at that point and trying to tell me, "This is what you should do, this is what you need to do," because I'm like, "Well, where were you the last 10 years?"
Exactly. Right.
But there is, and I laugh at a little bit because that independence definitely has carried me. It's carried me all over the world. Um, and I would not trade it for the world, but you get to a point, and a lot of women, and I just had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. We get to this point where sometimes we become overly independent. And once we become overly independent, it can not only impact our work because we are afraid to ask for help. We don't want to ask for help. We're ashamed to ask for help, even though we need it. It
Mhm.
leads to burnout. It leads to us resenting our jobs.
I definitely hear a lot this feeling of, um, I should always put other people's needs ahead of my own. I should never ask for help. I think it's about more than not wanting to impose on others, undermining our relationships, right? But it becomes about what does it say about me as a person, right? If I need help from other people or if I upset somebody. So it goes back to mirroring. As we get older, we start using other people as mirrors.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think for me, like being younger, I didn't, again, I mean, I was by myself so much, I didn't have a mirror. And so for me, I didn't have that. This is what this is what it could look like. This is what it should look like. This is what you should be doing.
Mhm.
I had to learn all of those things on my own.
Mhm.
And, it's interesting to me though, because I look back and even though I had people tell me that I couldn't do that, I would never amount to anything. I had all these negative things. I used them as fuel. And for a long time, I mean, I was okay with it. Right, wrong, or indifferent because I didn't know anything different.
Mhm.
But then there gets to this point where when you do start to raise your hand, when you do start to ask for help, when you do start to give your opinion, when you do start to speak up and you get shot down, that confidence starts to dwindle and you start to become quiet. And that is another aspect of it that we don't always talk about because we don't even realize it's happening until we've completely changed our position, our attitude, our
Mhm.
thinking, right? Because of this.
Yeah. And that's where being able to self-validate is so important. I call it the opposite of the golden rule. The golden rule, treat people the way you wanna be treated. So the opposite of the golden rule is you have a right to be treated the way you treat other people. And so being able to look at it from that perspective and say, if the situation reversed, how would I be treating this person? Right? Um, and using that as a way to decide whether or not it's appropriate to be speaking up. How would I react if that person spoke up to me? I'd probably be like, yeah, absolutely. You'd be supportive of it. So how do you help other women with this? And do you come across it a lot with other women?
Yeah, so I come across it a lot and I do speak about it in one of my keynotes as well. And the what I use is called the unapologetic mindset. And it is a framework. And I know we've
I like it.
discussed it, but it's the framework that I came up with. And it's
I love
based
it.
on, thank you. It's based on three different rules. And and, and it's really all about the inner reflection. And I do it in two different ways. So I have the three rules. I have your voice is your power. I have confidence is an action, not a feeling. And the third one is putting yourself first is not selfish. And the reason that I chose those three rules is because, first of all, if we waited until we felt confident to do something, we would never do it. Absolutely never. The second one, your voice is your power. When we use our voice, it can do powerful things. It can do powerful things for the good or for the bad. But the part that we often forget is that when we don't use our voice, we give our power to someone else because they are going to speak up. And so it's really important for us to be able to use our own voice. And a third one, putting yourself first is not selfish. We have always been told that you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
But the reality is that we cannot properly lead if we are always following everyone else.
Mhm.
Therefore, we have to be strategic in putting ourselves first to make sure that we can show up as the best version of ourselves every single day. So that's one of the ways that I help women through that. Um, I do see this a lot. And the hesitation that women have now, that's another big one is hesitation. We hesitate to speak up. We hesitate to make a decision. We start second guessing what we already know.
Yes.
And by doing that, we are sometimes delaying obvious choices. We are not being true to ourselves. And we are ultimately living lives that either no longer fit or the lives that we know straight out that we don't want. And so it's really important for women to dig deep inside themselves. And that's what I do with helping with coaching is figuring out where does this come from? Because a lot of times what we think is the problem, it's not.
We usually think we're the problem, or we second guess if there's something we could have done differently. I'm working with a client right now who's going through a divorce, and she had all these things to say about her husband, his drinking, his infidelity, his inappropriate behavior. And yet she was saying, I really miss him. And I just had to reflect that back to her to say, what is it that you're sad about? And she had to acknowledge, you're right. And I have, another client with same situation, only in the work setting, right? Where she got laid off and she was miserable at the job. She calls it toxic, right? But yet here she is second guessing herself if she could have done more. So it's like you said, we have these instincts inside of ourselves that are telling us this is not right for us, but we don't listen to them.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times we'll go to others for advice. And I've learned that there's two things. Number one, you're going to go to people that are going to tell you what you want to hear, or you're going to go to people and they're going to tell you something that you don't want to hear. And the difference between that is typically the people that tell you what you don't want to hear are the people that are telling you you should be grateful, you should be happy you have a job, you should be satisfied in the marriage you're in, you should be thankful that you're not having to try to date in today's society, right? That's not what you want to hear. But then on the same token, if you go to people that they tell you what you want to hear, oh, yes, I think you should leave that person. I think that you should go searching for another job. If something happens, then you kind of start to resent them. So
Mhm.
it's kind of a catch 22 sometimes with these conversations. And that's why I think that both coaches and therapists are so important because then you have a neutral person to talk to
Right.
about this. But yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to hear the conversations, but I do want to address something, as far as the layoffs right now and the client that you're working with, they're happening in mass numbers. Meta just announced another 8,000 employees that were being laid off. I was part of a layoff years ago after surviving. I can't even tell you how many. And I want to address it because a lot of times people do think, what could I have done differently? Should I have done more? Should I have worked longer hours? Should I have not taken the vacation?
Right.
And
Right. And their
want
identity is attached to it too.
100%, 100%. And the thing that I want to say about that is take the vacation, spend the time with your family. When you are looking at a layoff, it's about numbers on paper. It's literally a line item, right, wrong, or indifferent. That is what it is.
Mhm.
You can always find another job. And right now in the job market, that sounds like it's a very difficult thing to do, and it can be, but there's resources that can help you with that. But what you can't get back is that time with your family. You can't get back the time with your friends. You can't get back all of the dinners that you missed or the soccer games that you missed. And so it has to be, I really truly believe that everything that happens to us is neutral. It's how we choose to perceive it that
Mhm.
makes it positive or negative.
Mhm. Right, and how we cope with it as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and that doesn't mean that you won't go through the grieving process. In either instance, whether it be a divorce or a job loss, you're going to go through the grieving process. And that looks
Exactly.
different for everybody. But how you approach it will help you get through it.
Right. So, one of the things that I encourage in women is, your experiences or your perception and your feelings are telling you something even before, something happens. So, I think a lot of times we try to make decisions. Should I keep this job or should I walk away? Should I stay in this relationship or shouldn't I? What's really happening is it's not an either or kind of situation. It's you have multiple feelings at the same time. And the only way to find a solution is by taking into account all of your feelings because your feelings represent your needs. And so what happens is a lot of times people look at it, they approach it from the solution first and they say, should I stay in this job or shouldn't I stay in this job? As opposed to what is it that I need from a job and how can I get that?
This is gonna kind of not really nerd out, but this takes me back to my days in corporate because I did a lot of process improvement. And before you can improve a process, you have to figure out the real root cause of the issue. Because otherwise, what you're doing is you're trying to fix a process that maybe isn't necessarily completely broken. So you have to go back to what is the root cause of being unhappy in the relationship? What
Exactly.
is the root cause to being unhappy in that job? And then once you figure that out, it's a matter of looking at what are your absolute, and whether it's in a relationship or whether it is in a job, what are your absolute non negotiables? What
Mhm.
are your nice to haves? And what are your would be a benefit to have, but I'm okay without it?
Right.
So looking at those things that, and I've worked with a lot of women that have gone through career, um, that are going through career changes, that are looking at reinventing themselves as they're in the 40s and 50s and they're not exactly sure what they want to do. And what I did is I came up with a booklet that lets them see exactly to do exactly that, right? What is draining their energy? What energizes them? What can they take from what they've learned previously and move it over? And these are all things, again, that works for a job or a relationship
Yep.
because we know what didn't work in a previous relationship. That's baggage that we should leave behind. But what we also know is that at some point in time, there were some good things in that relationship that we
Mhm.
really liked, and that's what we can carry forward. It's a stepping stone into something else.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
so
you can learn even
yeah,
from the bad experiences about right, what you want and what you don't want.
absolutely. And again, and this is kind of something where I really look at it as focusing on the positive again. Instead of saying, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, think about what you do want, right? And again, carry that forward. Whatever was bad in the past, leave it in the past, but take the good with you and continue to build.
Mhm. Right. So, that booklet sounds really cool. Is that something that, women can access?
Well, I have it. I'll have to get it to you. It was actually a free resource that I put together just to help women, like I said, that are really looking at pivoting through career changes or even layoffs. And so I'll make sure that we can put it in the show notes.
Okay, right, great. So, I know you said you do some training as well. What kind of training do you do? And is that in any way related to helping women or empowering women?
Yeah, so absolutely. So it's all about second guessing. It's all about the hesitation. It's all about helping women make decisions faster by trusting their instincts, by speaking up, by following the unapologetic framework that I
Right.
created. And the reason for this is because we see in the economy today, women's voices are more important now than ever.
Yep.
And it is something that definitely works for men too, but it was created with women in mind. because we've all been silenced in some way, shape, or form. And it really, I do want to tell a story about it because this came out of one of my first jobs at Dell. I was 20, maybe 25 years old. And I had been hired to be a manager in manufacturing. I had no prior management experience and no manufacturing experience. But I went down there, I networked, and I had a manager that took a chance on me because the other managers were willing to help me. And so he hired me. And the Friday before I started, he took a new job in Nashville. So Monday, and this was a second shift job too, by the way. So Monday night, I walk into my first management meeting, and it's my second level boss now that's running the meeting. And he told me I was going to be working in a different area. And after the
Yep.
meeting, I know, after the meeting, I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, Brian," I said, "I was hired to work in this area, not that area." And he looked at me and he said, "I tell you where to work, you don't get to decide."
Mm. Wow.
And yeah, and when you spend time in environments too long like that, you don't want to speak up. You just want to shrink down to basically nothing, be unseen, unheard, do your time and get out. And quite honestly, that's what I did. And because of that one night, though, he did not like me. It was very evident. Other managers could even point it out, but it was because I said, "Hey, this is what I was hired for." And so that's why
Wow.
I'm so passionate about women not hesitating, not second guessing and using their voice. But the moment that you choose to speak up, you also have to know what to say. And that's where some of that leadership training comes in is
Mm.
we work through the scripts, we work through real life scenarios that these people have coming up. And that way we can get them ready to have those tough conversations that we don't always necessarily like to have or know how to have properly without it sounding emotional, without it sounding right like we are being aggressive, but we are being assertive and
Mhm.
holding our ground.
Right. How much, though, should women be worried about how they're expressing themselves, and how much do we also need to push the envelope in our culture to adapt more to women not worrying about the relationship? So let me give you an example. I was attending a membership committee meeting for an organization, and something had happened in the news. And so they were talking about, it was this boy who had brought a gun to school and it went off in his backpack. And so obviously this was a big deal, and they spent like 5-10 minutes talking about it. And I waited and I looked for an opening, and then I said, "Are we going to talk about membership?" And it was like deer in the headlight. It wasn't like, "Oh, you're right, Elaine. What are we thinking? Let's, yeah, we need to talk about membership. That's why we're here." No, it was, "What did you just do?" And I think they were surprised because it came from me specifically, but I really debated whether to even speak up at all, which is, this is what women do, right?
Mhm.
And you could argue maybe I could have said it differently, but at what point do we also start putting the onus on the people around us to also accept when a woman doesn't put people's feelings, people's perceptions, or etiquette ahead of doing the right thing? Because ultimately that was the right thing, and
Mhm.
the chair acknowledged that later, but at the time she actually reached out to me afterwards and said, "I think you need to apologize," because apparently one of the 2 women complained about it because she thought I was interrupting her when she was talking about a sensitive topic. But anyway, I wonder if you have any thoughts about that. It's a
Again,
hard line to balance.
yeah, it is. It's definitely a fine line. But at the same time, going back to what was the root cause? What was the purpose of the meeting? Why were you there? How did it get to the point that it got derailed? And I mean, again, I don't know exactly what was said. Could it have been said differently? Possibly. Could it have been, can this be tabled for another time? So, without knowing the exact conversation that took place, I think a lot of times when we just say, hey, can we get back on track? Or when a man says, can we get back on track? We can get back on track. But again, it shouldn't be any different. And that is the cultural perception that needs to change. It doesn't matter if it's a male or female saying it. The facts are the facts. And that's where we need to be able to stick to the facts. And
Mhm.
women are often perceived as more emotional beings.
Mhm.
And so to your point, maybe that's why it was perceived a little bit different is because you are not continuing on the emotional conversation, but
Exactly.
rather going back to the facts.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't think that women should be ashamed for sticking to the facts. I don't think that they should be shamed for not being emotional. I mean, I'm an emotional being myself, but I have other women in my family that are like stone cold, not in a
Mhm.
bad way, right? They're loving and everything else, but they can have those conversations, no problem.
Right.
But I think it also comes back to how were you raised? What conversations did you typically have? And yeah, I mean, I would say a woman shouldn't have to change her position
Mhm.
just to make others in the room feel comfortable.
Right. I like that example because I it gets into this bigger picture that I was talking about as far as our culture, because I think that women, we can be our own worst enemies toward each other because we have this expectation, I think, that women are always going to think about people's feelings. So women will react to each other just like the example that I gave. And I think, can you imagine if this was a group of men? Do you think that one of them would hesitate and say, "Gee, I wonder if I should say this because it might hurt somebody's feelings?" I just can't even imagine them doing that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are some men out there because, there are some very emotional men out there. There are some very, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Empathic?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yes, there's men that are very empathetic to other people. But, you know, the reality is that if what you said were said at the beginning of the meeting, right? I mean, let me ask you this. How long did you think about saying what you wanted to say before you said it?
I mean, it was, several minutes. I mean, like I said, I don't know, when it was kept going on, but it's like,
Mhm.
and so what happens with me is I have this sense of right and wrong, and the longer it went on, the more I was like, "This isn't right." And not speaking up feels wrong because
Yeah.
I'm silencing myself when I know that the right thing to do is for us to shift into, why we were there. And it was interesting because our meetings were a lot like that in the beginning, and over time, the chair just started being just the opposite. She was like, "Okay, we're here, talk about membership. Let's be serious about this. Let's not dilly-dally." And that's what I think we were doing in those early days of the committee.
I think that that's a great point of why we shouldn't hesitate because the longer we let something go on, a lot of times we walk into a room and we know exactly what we're going to say. We know exactly the conversation we want to have. We know the recommendation that we want to make. And then all of a sudden, someone starts talking. And then all of a
Mhm,
sudden, someone else starts talking. And then this continues on. And then by the time we speak up, it's like, wait, why is this being said now? Or we decide, you know what, this isn't the right time. And we let it go completely.
mhm,
And both of those can be damaging not only to us as women, it can be damaging to leadership, it can be damaging to decision making, And ultimately, it can cost time and money.
Mhm.
And so that's why it is important to speak up right away. Don't second guess it. Don't hesitate, but know what you're going to say in the moment. And it's not always easy. It takes practice. I will be the first one to admit that, but it is necessary to feel comfortable enough with yourself to speak up, especially like to your point, you said, you're right and wrong. I see the world in a lot of gray, and that
Mhm.
just because of a lot of my lived experiences, especially in different countries. I always play devil's advocate in different things,
Mhm.
but while I'm doing that, I'm asking questions. I'm learning more. And so that way I can make a recommendation based on that.
Yeah. I also think, though, that people in general have a tendency to take responsibility for the way other people manage their emotions and express them, right? So even if, I mean, we can't always be perfect. So I think the other thing is to trust yourself. And if it turns out that somebody is rubbed the wrong way, they're still responsible for how they manage that emotion and how they express it. And they could come to you and say, hey, that really hurt my feelings, or I didn't appreciate being interrupted, or whatever it was. The interesting thing about the example that I gave you is that the person that complained, she complained to the chair, and I did eventually apologize to her. And you know what she did? She was like, "Oh, no, it was no big deal,"
Yeah.
right? So
Little
she
passive
didn't come
aggressive.
to me and say, "Hey," because I didn't intend to interrupt her. I thought I was found this pause in the conversation, but apparently, I don't know, there was some misunderstanding. So, but, it would have been fine if she'd come to me and said, "Hey, that really hurt my feelings. I was talking about my son and how it related to the story." But we have to put that onus, I think, back on other people, because otherwise what women do is they engage in a lot of mind reading and anticipating other people's reactions. And all of that goes into the mix about whether I should say something or not say something. What do I imagine this person's gonna say, or how they're gonna respond, or what are they thinking? And just a lot of energy, as opposed to, I'm gonna try my best, but if I, quote unquote, fail in some way, or if it doesn't go off the way I intended it to, other people are also responsible for the way they manage their emotions and the way they express them.
Yeah. I mean, when you're looking at something like that, the only behavior that you can control is your own. You can't
Right.
control anyone else's behavior. You can't control anyone else's emotions. That is up to that person to control. And, that reminds me of something that I read not that long ago. And it says that when you yell in a relationship, like when you're in a fight and you
Mhm.
yell, what you are demonstrating is your inability to communicate.
Right.
And so I think that that's a perfect example, right? I mean, you can only control yourself. You can't control the world or what anyone else is going to say about
Mhm.
you. But having that conversation with you obviously would have been a better conversation than going to someone else and getting a third party involved that had no business necessarily even being involved.
Right.
So, of course, always having the direct conversation and understanding what was the real, again, root cause. And I've
Mhm.
said that a lot in this conversation, but that's what it really comes down to. What was the root cause for her being angry? And have the conversation with you.
Mhm. Right. Right. I cannot believe how fast this hour went by. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I thought we had." So anyway, what would be your takeaway for women?
My key takeaway for women is that you have a voice. You have a voice for a reason. Everything that you have today has come because of the women before you. Everything that you choose to do today is going to pave the way for the women that come after you. That is a huge responsibility, but it is a huge privilege.
Mhm.
So pave the way that you want women to be able to show up 5, 10, 20, 50 years from
Right, right. Yeah, and there's a whole generation that's watching, and they can only see themselves in what they see modeled in front of them.
now. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh, One other thing I would like to say is every
Mhm.
time that I think about how does that relate to me or how am I doing that, I think about a conversation that happened between Oprah and Maya Angelou. And Oprah was starting her school for women in Africa. And she was talking to Dr. Maya Angelou and she said, I think this is going to be my legacy. And Dr. Maya Angelou looked at her and she said, you don't get to decide what your legacy is going to be
Mm,
because your legacy is not one thing, it's everything.
mm,
And so I don't think that we remember that enough. And if that's a lesson that Oprah learned, it's a lesson that we can all learn and we can all take forward with us.
mhm. Right.
Be be the future that you want to see.
Yeah. And I think that's really a positive because for women especially, a lot of times they feel inadequate because maybe there was a gap in their resume or they spent a lot of time not working outside the home, or they're just making a total shift from one career to another, and all of it matters.
Mhm. Own the gap. That's another thing that I would say as far as that's concerned, right? I mean, we see so many women and men, but we see gaps on resumes.
Right.
And we don't necessarily understand why. And people are being overlooked, especially right now. They're being overlooked for that gap or that gap is coming up.
Yeah.
You don't know if that person had to quit their job because they had a cancer diagnosis. You don't know if that person had to take care of a sick loved one.
Right.
You don't know if they lost a child. You
Hmm.
have no idea what that person has gone through in that gap. It could be
Right.
that they decided to step away and raise their children, and
Right.
that's a full time job,
Right. And
you
it's
know?
all goes into the mix, like you were talking about legacy. I mean, it all goes into the mix, and it's part of what makes that person um, qualified,
Mhm.
right? It
Yeah.
all matters.
Absolutely. And I know people that have decided to put that on their resume, right? I mean, they stepped away. It's not even something that they have to necessarily explain to
Hmm.
someone, but it does at least get them around the question of, well, why is there this gap in your resume? It's everyone's personal choice to either put it on the resume of what they were doing in that in between time or not, but own that gap because there were things happening during that
Yeah.
time that are special, that are important, that needed to be done. It's not just you were sitting on the couch flipping through
Right.
channels all day. And so I think that that needs to be it needs to be addressed and it needs to be understood that it's okay to have a gap.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for this conversation. It's really been wonderful having you. So, if people want to learn more about you, or they want to hire you for coaching or for speaking or training, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so people can connect with me on LinkedIn and it's Jessica Cumming 04 because the original Jessica Cumming was taken. So Jessica Cumming 04 on LinkedIn. Also, my website is jcnewbeginnings.com. And there you can find out more about my coaching, my speaking, training, as well as the podcast.
That's great. And again, that's We Are Women Unapologetically
Yep.
podcast,
For the
right?
podcast. Yep. Yep.
And
And
we'll
I'm
have all.
actually just, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, and, we're gonna be approaching 50 episodes, if not, over 50 episodes pretty soon,
Oh,
so
wow.
pretty
Wow.
nice milestone.
That is. That
Yeah.
is. Hard to maintain those. Yeah.
It is.
So, thanks for listening to the Self Authority Podcast. If this conversation resonated with you, like and subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. You can learn more about Jessica Cumming, her coaching, speaking, and podcast, We Are Women Unapologetically, in the show notes. And remember, self-authority isn't about proving your worth through perfection. It's about learning to trust yourself even when you're imperfect, uncertain, or afraid of disappointing other people. I'm Elaine Belson. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.